Jeff Ritzman, how are you?
Good, Jeremy. How are you?
Good. Should we just do the Jeff, so the Jer up front here so everyone knows that this is just a you and me show?
Yeah, I guess.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, okay.
So the Jeff.
So the Jer.
Yeah, that feels good. Yeah. I feel like if we keep doing too many shows of just you and me, we're going to outstay our welcome because we've now got that Sunday show.
Yeah.
Which is every Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Blog Talk Radio. That's Blog Talk Radio, Paratopia Live.
That's right.
You like that?
That was pretty smooth.
Thank you. The reason we come to you, open-armed and in peace, is that we want to talk about some format changes to the show that we're thinking about making here. So, essentially, well, what's interesting to me here is that I don't know how much I want to say because, someone gave me a private email basically asking me for help with an issue, And I thought, help with an issue, eh? Maybe we need to do some sort of paranormal Dr. Phil show, call it the urgency dialogues or something. But maybe not. I mean, maybe, I don't know, it kept evolving in me due to my laziness of not wanting to type out long diatribes of possibly helpful information, that it would be easier for me to speak that information and more helpful to everyone if everyone could hear it. But that's a lot to ask of someone coming to you for help, so I'm not going to do that. But I went to Jeff and I said, hey, Jeff, something feels like it needs to happen here on this show. And maybe the answer is not that I do a little side Dr. Phil show, but that we both approach interviewing differently, so that no longer are we interviewing researchers and asking them, we don't tend to ask the same old questions, but still, it's set up with an interview vibe.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to do just conversations. Then, of course, Jeff said, primarily those conversations need to be with other experiencers, no longer with researchers. So we're thinking about taking the show in that direction, and of course we want your feedback on that, but it seems like, especially with the live show on Sunday, it seems like we're at a place now where people, for whatever reason, trust us enough to come out and talk about their stuff and feel pretty good after they've done it because, they got to talk about it and they got to think about it, in deeper ways than probably just thinking about it alone affords you. So what if we just do that on the show more often? I don't know. I think that's sort of the way we need to go, but in order to do that, of course, we would need listeners to be willing to do that. And we know that when we wanted listeners to sort of do their own shows or ask them to do their own shows, they're pretty unresponsive there. But I feel like something's changed, and people are ready to do this maybe.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's that big a departure from what we've been doing lately. I mean, we had Kelly on, which was kind of out of the left field. Came at us that way. I mean, that was someone you met at a conference, so that was not planned by any big stretch, I don't suppose. But I would like to see more people write in and say, "I've got a paranormal experience that I'd like to relate and talk about, or I've got a lifetime of them that I'd like to talk about." I just think, I mean, I hate to say it this way, and I certainly don't mean any disrespect to any guest that we've ever had, and every guest that we've ever had, for the most part, I would say, is I would love to have them back on. Colin Andrews and Dr. McKenna and Lloyd Auerbach, all these people. I'd love to have all these people back on the show at some point. But I feel like at least in the paranormal researcher, direction, I think we've kind of talked to everyone that we really wanted to. Including Jacques Vallée, which was great. All those shows are great. I look back on them and I go, I'm really glad that we did all this. But ultimately, I think people are interested in hearing what someone experienced directly from that person rather than a middleman researcher. And of course, we know at this point, everybody knows, our audience knows this better than anyone else, that if you're getting a story through a researcher about a case that they studied, you're also getting all the trappings of their notions of what it may mean, instead of getting it right from the person. I think getting it from the person is really the way to go. And I think people find that genuinely more interesting to hear the inflection of tone and the way someone describes something, like when we had Lobo on or Kelly on or any of these people. I mean, it's and I think Kelly could do another show myself, but I would like to see people like that come on the show multiple times. But anyone out there who has an interesting experience that they've had, or like I said, a lifetime of those, I'd love to have you write us, paratopiapodcast@gmail.com, and say, yeah, I've got a couple hours one night to hang out, and we're just going to talk. It's not going to be a big question list. We're just going to, you tell us what happened, and then we're going to talk about it. And I think, I don't know, I feel like that's almost more productive than the next guy coming to, plug a book or a conference or whatever, and then we talk to them about what's in their book. And it's not that that's not important, but I think we've kind of reached this spot where, let's be honest. I'll be honest. I don't care. I have to be honest. It really gets tedious trying to schedule a lot of these interviews with people because a lot of them are very busy, or they don't hold the same schedule as us because either they're in the UK or something like that. It's not horribly difficult, but you wonder, for the effort that you're putting into garnering guests and writing them and explaining your take and all of that, because we do that just about with every guest. I wonder if we shouldn't be going right to the source. In other words, bypassing research circles for the time being, and kind of, still having them sprinkled throughout, but rather having those direct experience or discussions. I mean, that feels like it almost might be more productive. I don't know. Is that?
Well, it does feel more productive. It feels like, well, those are the best shows that we have, as you said to me privately. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Colin Andrews is coming back on the show.
Right, yeah.
Probably the first week of November.
Right.
If we can nail down a time. And his email to me was, essentially, let's try to get Pat Delgado back in on this conversation the way we did last time, sort of right. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But,
right.
I mean, really what he's saying there is he welcomes the sort of high strangeness vibe or tone or whatever that comes out of that type of deep, intimate conversation. And that was one of our best shows. And I feel like we get that sense of, at least intimacy, if not high strangeness, but certainly intimacy. We're seeing it on the live show on Sundays, certainly, when, for instance, Brad called in, or Sean, right? Was it Sean?
I believe so, yes.
I'm sorry if I'm saying the wrong names here, but, anyone who listens to the shows knows who I'm talking about. Or we've had on Piglet Shameful, who we could have on yet again, if you would like to come on.
Yeah.
These are the conversations that are more, they're wealthy, they're rich in goodness.
Yeah, they hold more, I think, at least the mode that we're in right now with doing core, I think it's kind of almost more apropos to talk to those people than going yet another research theorem.
Well, it makes sense with Project Core, certainly.
Yeah.
But I also think that, in a way, people like Piglet Shameful and the others who were the first people to come on our show and, speak as experiencers, were kind of, pioneering in the sense of showing everybody who I think was afraid to, for instance, do their own podcast when we tried to do that, to show them that, look, it's cool. It's cool to come on and be naked and be raw and be afraid and do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you'll gain something from it. It's not even just cool to do, and it's not just that you'll survive being in the spotlight. It's that it's actually beneficial to everyone involved, including the listeners. And I think when you see the feedback on the forums for those shows, I think that reflects that.
Yeah, well, and it's also not the big scary spotlight that you think it is. And I
certainly won't be, because it won't be an interview anymore. It'll just be
that's exactly it. Yeah, and I think a lot of the times that when we do the live show, I think a lot of people don't call in because they're nervous, because people have written me and told me I didn't call in because I was a little bit edgy, and there's no reason for that. I mean, we are not freaking rock stars, and yes, a lot of people listen to the show. we know, we keep track of the numbers. There's a lot of people listening to this show, which I'm overjoyed about. But that's no reason. I mean, it's recorded. You know, if you stumble, sneeze, or burp, we edit it out. I mean, it's nothing. There's nothing to be afraid of. We ain't gonna bite you. And I think that ultimately, when people talk about it, and they are in an environment where it's okay to talk about it, no matter how bizarre it is, I think that's I think that is a good release for some people, just to be able to speak about it in a forum where they know they're not going to get snickers and that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's the way I'd kind of like to see it go. But we've got guests already lined up. And here's my other bit of honesty in producing this podcast, is that researchers that kind of meet Jeremy and I, we have a certain sensibility, let's say it that way. Certain people you won't hear on this show because we just won't entertain them. People like I don't know, like Barbara Lamb or Jeremy, give me some names. Michael Horn. I mean, these are these are people that are on other podcasts, but it's like we just won't waste our effort with that. And I certainly wouldn't want to subject an audience that I've grown to really care about what they think and how they respond to this show. I wouldn't subject them to that, because that's just like shooting fish in a barrel. What's the point, really, to bring them on and do a hit episodes? Like, forget it. I'm not interested in that. And I think early on, we all of us, the audience and Jeremy and I, went through this period of, defense and conflict, setting up the barriers and the sandbags and the barbed wire. And it's like, for what? It's like we're ignoring the bigger picture here. And the bigger picture, aside from whatever you might think of any researcher or any sort of theorem or anything like that, what we're really missing here is that there are people out there who would love to talk about this in an open forum and discuss their experiences. And I think that's really where we should be looking for. But the question is, can we get enough people to do that? And that's unknown right now. We don't know if we're putting the word out here right now. I'm going to make up a nice little banner for our homepage that if you have this sort of experience, if you've got one really, even if it's just one experience that is beyond your normal life, we would like to have you come on and talk about that. Maybe with someone else too. I mean, maybe we have two people on at the same time and we can kind of all bounce ideas off each other. And that seems like a more productive thing. And that's kind of what we've always tried to do, I think.
Yeah, and I've actually convinced, finally today, a friend of mine from high school to come on and talk about this incredible UFO sighting he had. And he's lived an amazingly anti-structural life, let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. But of all the things that he should be embarrassed about, this is the one thing he's embarrassed to talk about.
Right.
And he doesn't talk about it at all. And he didn't want to come on the show unless, his witness or, another friend from high school came on with him, but I convinced him to come anyway. He hasn't talked to him in years and can't get a hold of him and all that. If he wants to come on too, that'd be great. If not, then at least he's willing to come on.
Right.
And so I feel like, we've definitely heard it with our researcher guests. How many times do people say in an interview, oh, that's a great question. Oh, nobody's ever asked me that, so on and so forth. And I think especially in doing the live show on Sundays, we've sort of seen that that sort of vibe with just normal everyday people calling in, just sort of saying, well, or even on the show with Lobo, saying I've never admitted that to anyone, or that's the first time I felt comfortable speaking about it, and so on and so forth. So I think the more that you're starting to hear that from just other experiencers on this show, maybe the more enticing it is to actually want to come on and talk about the thing that you don't get to talk about.
It feels good. I mean, and if that helps people feel better, then I'm all about that. But I think for my money, it's great to interview people that you've followed over the years, like Dr. Valet and Dr. McKenna, and God, the list goes on, Colin Andrews, et cetera, et cetera. It's great to be able to talk to them and interact with them, and in many cases, like with Dennis and myself and Colin and the show. I mean, it's like, you become friendly with these people, and that's great. But when you've got this incredibly lucky opportunity that you do a podcast and you don't really know. I mean, we didn't really know how this was going to be received. We didn't know going out of the box that we'd even last this long. And instead, in every way, I think Jeremy can agree with me here that it has exceeded our expectations and exceeded what we thought it would be in every possible way. And so we've been incredibly lucky and blessed to have an audience that wants to come along with us on this thing. And you just wonder, how many times can you have people on that you've had on before? Like, no, you not only wear out your welcome with them, but you wear out the audience with kind of the same thing, unless they're coming to talk about a completely different subject or a different case or to go deeper into a case. And that's all great, and we'll still do that. Don't anyone misunderstand what I'm saying, that we're never going to have another paranormal investigator on. That's ridiculous. We absolutely will. But I think what we're doing is kind of, rather than changing, I think format change is maybe a little too harsh a way to look at it. More along the lines of, we want to add in the next level of what an interview is, or what a discussion is, rather, to have the actual experiencers on.
Did you just hear my stomach?
Yeah. No. Oh. Are you hungry?
No, but that was so loud, I thought there's no way you couldn't have heard that. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No EVP there, so... but this is what I this is how I look at it, is we've hit upon this really amazing bit of luck and support from folks like you who listen to this, and to which we are forever grateful for that. And so to have that kind of support behind you and to have the kind of listenership that we do, it doesn't make sense to just keep doing things that are a yata data data show. Let's do core. Let's try and make something happen with everyone. Like, let's all try to collectively work on this. Rather than just being a show, it becomes more than that. It becomes active participant in doing real research and work, which is kind of where I came from with this whole thing. I just think that this is the opportunity to do that, and to do core and all of these other little separate things that we wanted to do over the years, that we just thought, well, we don't really have me and Jeremy alone just going on different shows and talking about doing a project like core probably wouldn't be as successful. But we've got Paratopia, which we've been blessed with, and like I said, an amazing amount of luck for. And why not use that to do something, to make something productive happen? And I think that's my outlook on it. So it's I would say it's more of an addition to the interviews that you've grown to know about the show, where we go further with most people and go off the grid with some researchers that you follow. And I love doing those too. And I don't mean earlier to say that it's too much of a hassle to track them down. It's not. This is what we do. But you've got a certain amount of people in this field that, let's be honest, are really worth having a really hardcore discussion with. It's a limited number of people in this to begin with, but then when you narrow down, who are the really serious, analytical, critical thinking people, and experiencers as well. That's a limited, finite number. And do we want to keep repeating those same thematics, or do we want to go and add in people who may or may not line up with what we think? I mean, it doesn't just because if you hear something on the show that you don't agree with, that's fine. That doesn't mean you can't come on and tell us what you think, provided it's not, hypnotically retrieved memory. That's the only caveat.
Well, maybe we'll get into that in a minute.
So,
I guess I just see it as perhaps a natural growth. It's like we built the foundation, doing, normal interviews, or at least normal interviewees, that sort of typical interviewees that you would expect to hear, plus going outside into other realms of the sciences and sociology and so forth. And that was great, and that built us the foundation which is our audience. I mean, because the thing that we bitched about for a long time was that there's just not enough people who care to see this thing as anything other than, nuts and bolts, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But clearly, we have a very large audience that does care. And so I think we've dangled the carrot, much like the phenomenon. We've dangled the carrot. We've got the attention of the audience, and now it feels like maybe at least a good enough portion of the audience is wanting to take that next step into having a discussion amongst ourselves. And I think that's what's needed. It's like, okay, you could see it this way. We used normal talk show format standards to gather us all together, and now it's time for us to talk amongst ourselves. Now that we've sort of weeded out a lot of, the typical, I saw a UFO driving down the interstate,
right.
Type listeners, we don't tend to hear from those people as much, so maybe they're not out there as in our audience as they are in other shows, and so, great. If all the smart people are in the room, let's start talking.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing to me to go to the message board and see that, first time and second time and third time posters are posting paragraphs of stuff, of discussion. I mean, that speaks volume for the intelligence of the audience. And wouldn't it be almost more interesting to have all of those heads together on one person's case, talking about what they perceived, how they perceived it, what happened to them throughout their life, or just on a one-off. And I'd really like to explore more of the one-off experiences. People like Travis Walton, who I guess we could say allegedly is a one-off major experience, but we're not sure about that. But somebody like that had a one-off experience, like what constitutes that one-off? And if you could get in a conversation with someone like that, could you say, what other strange things that you can't account for, and would you actually see more out of that person than the one-off? And then, I mean, the one-off experiencers are the people that I think the most fascinated with. And so if you've got just a one-off, that's okay. We'd still love to talk to you about it. And like I said, we'll still do, some of the researchers that we like and that you all seem to respond to well. We'll still have them back on to talk about things and maybe to discuss Project Core results and so on and so forth. But I think it would be a neat addition, provided that we can actually get enough people to come on. That's going to be the real thing. So again, there's nothing to be afraid about. There's nothing to be nervous about in doing this. It's real easygoing, and we'll just have a discussion rather than an interview, which is almost more fun.
Very good. Now, did you want to say anything about hypnosis, or have we beaten that to the ground and only a handful of people are still on board with it?
I don't think it's I don't think it's worth a great deal of breath, but it's I don't know. There's been a discussion on the message board that's now raged for some days. I haven't really been involved with it that much, but I mean, here is
lucky you.
Yeah, I know. Well, here's my end result is that it's fine to air your disagreement. That's fine, but ultimately for me, it comes down to a very simple thing. What we've presented on the show via Lilienfeld, via Woods, via Vaeni, et cetera, on and on. Studies that have been posted from mainstream psychological institutions and medical associations. If you can still look at that, and I can't even believe that the words are still coming out of my mouth, but if you can feel that holds some weight still in any meaningful way, then you need to bring something to the table that refutes those studies. And for my money, I think that any resistance that is seen over the hypnotic recall, regression therapy, whatever you want to call it, is basically things like, well, the Betty and Barney Hill case has come up a couple of times. And what I've often said in this field is that people become married to their evidence. And I've noticed this in personal situations, even when someone hands me a photograph that they think is the penultimate photograph that supports their belief system in the paranormal or in UFOs and aliens. And I go, yeah, that's a bird, or, that's a prop because I built it. It's in a warehouse in Baltimore, that sort of thing. You tend to run into people who have essentially laid a lot of weight upon certain cases. And if those cases contain hypnotically retrieved memories, and then we turn around and we show that this is not a viable method for getting at those memories, then that pretty much lays that case on the ground. Am I saying nothing happened to Betty and Barney Hill? Absolutely not. Something happened. Do I believe what they recalled? No. I'm not sure what happened. Something very strange happened to them. Something very strange happened in Bentwaters. I could go on and on. We know at this point that even memory, conscious memory, is flawed. And so that's tough to do. But then you're talking about hypnotically retrieve stuff. And there's one really, really important thing, really important point that I want to make here with this, is that a lot of people have brought up the court systems using this to help people recall accidents and robberies and murders and rapes and so on and so forth. And yes, that was used. It's no longer admissible, so that should tell you something right there. But the very fact that they're using that, or did use that in those situations, let's keep one thing in mind, that those are not an encounter with the paranormal. And the paranormal is a decidedly different venue of perception than rape, murder, or an accident. I think it's safe to say now, if we don't know a whole lot about this, we do know that perceptions can be highly altered by the phenomena. And so when you recall something outright, that's fine. That doesn't necessarily mean, and this goes for me, Jeremy, and anyone else, we can only go with what we concretely remember. But do we know that that is the absolute? No, we don't. We know how it presents, and that's why we're always kind of careful to say it presented itself in such a way. When you're talking about hypnotic recall, then you're talking about a decidedly different type of perception. And you're talking about being regressed back, not to an event that occurred in waking hours in normal life. This occurred in a very special venue that is probably not that normal of a normal life. You've got a decided difference between a paranormal event and a traffic accident or a murder. There's a different thing going on there. It's more than trauma. It's more than stress. It is altered in some way. So that's one point to make. The other point to make is that it's a dangerous practice. And Dr. Lilienfeld said this to us right then and there. I mean, I had a private conversation with him beforehand, and essentially it is changing people. It is changing their memories. And just think of it this way. If you can't get your head around exactly what that means, be hypnotized that you strangled a puppy. Let them regress you back and let them suggest to you that you did something really horrible, or any kind of thing that would evoke some kind of visceral response. And there can be a chance. I mean, chances are not, unless they're really good at suggesting this kind of thing and putting that into your head. But there's the potential that you may come out of that experience actually believing that you did it, and it's every bit as potent, if not more potent, than an actual memory. That is very, very, very dangerous. And so, you've got all of these different factors in play, and everything that we've mentioned and everything that I talked to Dr. Lilienfeld about is the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that's wrong with the practice. And so, in the end, when you can't separate confabulation and from real memory, then ultimately it renders it all useless. And so we've got to start over. And that was pretty much our thought with Core is let's start out with just asking some questions and kind of work it up from there.
Hello, this is Raymond Moody, and you are listening to Paratopia.
Urgency is thrilling and ardently intelligent and graceful work. Mitch Horowitz, author of Occult America, The Secret History of How Mysticism Shaped Our Nation. The ending was powerful and smack on. Colin Andrews, internationally acclaimed author / human consciousness researcher. Jeremy writes a mean book filled with subtle humor and flashes of deep insight into who we are and what we're really capable of. A must-read for any serious truth seeker. Deb Cobble, author of Abducted, completely blows everything you think is true out of the water. I urge you to get this book because it's got a lot of power. It is a deeply interesting and deeply funny book. Whitley Strieber, author of The Key and Communion.
Urgency by Jeremy Vaeni. It might be the most important book you read all year.
It will be the most fascinating. In stores and paperback, on the Kindle and on the Nook, now available.
If you record audio for any purpose, chances are you want it to be heard. You want to attract the largest audience possible who can hear your message. That's where we come in. We're cyberears.com, a revolutionary internet service that will host your audio files and help you promote and track its popularity. Considering hosting a podcast to the world? We have all the automated tools to make the process as simple and easy as it can be. No technical mumbo-jumbo to work out. Cyberears.com does all the work for you. You record it, we take care of the rest. So don't delay. Go to cyberears.com today and register for a free trial account. Upload your audio files and get heard. With cyberears.com, it's your audio on your terms.
You know, when you've spent years thinking that whatever this is works in a certain way and we understand it to a certain point, to one day be told we don't know anything, or we know an eighth or a 16th of what we thought we knew. That's a tough pill to swallow, because essentially what it boils down to is you've been had. You've been had. That's really what it comes down to. And I am, believe me, the first person to say I've been had plenty of times. And everybody has. Everybody. I'm sure if you go back in any of the big wigs or the heroes of ufology, at one point or another, they've all been had. It happens. And all you can do is learn from that mistake, or learn from, you learn not to take the plunge. I said this on ATS when I did their live show this past weekend, right? Yeah. When I first read UFO Magazine way back in the day, and I saw Terrence McKenna, psychedelic UFOs, and I thought, oh, great. This is all we fucking need. We need some hophead telling us, there's some connection between drugs and this and that. That's great. That's just what we need. Thanks, UFO Magazine. Look how wrong I was there. And I didn't say that public to anyone. I just said that to myself, but I'll admit it. I thought that was just hysterical. Like, why in the world would they post anything to do with drugs? Isn't that the first question? Were you high at the time? Well, you know what? Needless to say, my mind has certainly been changed, and I was 210% wrong about what everything that was getting at. And I didn't arrive at that until I was much older, by the way. I think that article came out back when I was in my mid-20s or maybe early 30s, but, your attitudes change about it, and you see the value of what certain people have to say that you thought was just absolute nonsense. And then there are some people that you think, wow, these people have got something together, and then later on you find out they haven't got anything together. Much like everyone else, when I first heard about, the whole hypnosis thing, and I was listening to these stories so intently, like, isn't that interesting? I didn't initially think that's bullshit. I thought, well, that's an interesting thing. I think when I first heard about abductions in general, I thought it was nonsense because I was too dumb to make the own correlations in my own life. But, when it came to hypnotic recall and all that, you heard people like John Mack, for instance, talking about these consistencies that keep coming up time and time again. I was like, that's curious. What does that mean? And then I started looking. And the more I looked, the more I found out. And I found out in fairly short order, I guess, that there's a lot of problems with this. And here's a big problem: cultural contamination and pleasing the therapist and leading questions and so on and so forth. And then I just, I became one of those people at the conference that no one wanted to hear. Nobody wanted to get into discussion with, because at that point in time, everyone was going to a hypnotherapist and getting regressed to remember what ever happened to them.
Well, let me throw this at you then. Let me play devil's advocate. The answer to that is, well then, how do you know that the studies on hypnosis that we keep talking about are valid, and they won't just be invalidated in a few years? How do we know that any of the science is valid and good and better than any of the other science that's come out about it?
Well, the science from one side, I would say predominantly came from an artist and a history professor. John Mack, I think Lee said on our live show this week, he listened to, I think, an old interview or something, and he said, you talk about leading, oh my God. I mean, it was just on and on. So how do we know that? Well, because number one, the study has advanced. I mean, there's that thing. There's also the part that I think has been one of my biggest aggravations in the paranormal, is that immediately when someone is outside of the field, they're untrustworthy of laying any kind or leveling any kind of educational opinion on this. In other words, we'd rather listen to, a history professor than a psychological doctor who has more credentials in education to level a more accurate diagnosis of, or a more accurate idea of what's really happening in the mind, under hypnosis. They have studied this over and over and over. I mean, the very fact that it's been dismissed out of courts should be a big marker for people. How do we know it's not going to get turned over? I think at some point, I'm hopeful at some point that we will come up with a technology that can decide accurately whether a memory that's recalled in that fashion is confabulation or is a real memory. If that happens, then okay, then that's fine.
Well, let me ask you this: if the people at Johns Hopkins who are doing DMT research find that it's all hallucinations, a product of the brain, are you going to believe that?
Mm-hmm.
You are.
Of course, but that doesn't mean that it's any less real. See, there you're getting into a perceptual issue.
Well, it means that it's not a radio tuning into other frequencies and other dimensions.
Well, I don't think they can say that, because we don't know what perception is. They can say it originates in the brain.
See, that's the thing that gets me, because this was one of the sort of comparisons in this thread as to that sort of research. And it's like, no, you don't get it. Hypnosis, we're talking about memories, things that actually happened. We're not talking about something they can't make a statement about, such as... Right. These drugs produce blank and hallucinations are purely blank. I mean, you can't make blanket statements about that, but you can make a blanket statement about little Billy stubbed his toe last Wednesday. Like that either happened or it didn't happen. And if little Billy goes under hypnosis and remembers something completely different than what mom wrote in her diary that day, then something's wrong here,
Right. Things don't line up. I mean, and there are, there is there's the whole issue of memory, which we need to talk more about, and probably we'll talk to Dr. Lewinfeld at some point in the future about that, about regular memory. Like, how can people better remember things? I mean, I look at, and this is the hard part, this is where it gets really difficult, but I think, the best system for memory to me came from Terrence talking about people in the psychedelic experience. Like, how do we bring more back, Terrence? What is your opinion on how can this be done? And he said the best thing to do is to leave yourself breadcrumbs going in when you have a certain experience, then associate that experience, if you can gather your presence of mind well enough, with a number, a letter, whatever. And that helps with memory. That helps with trying, because so many times people come out of a psychedelic state and don't remember everything. So maybe I'll ask Dr. Lowenfeld, is that a viable way of doing that or not? Or is memory just that fallible and we have to live with that? But as far as look at Dr. Persinger. I mean, you want to talk about someone who's proven that certain things are a stimulus of the brain. He can make you see an apparition. He can take you through a near-death experience, but they're missing key things. The near-death experience, they go through the tunnel, but there's no light at the end. They see the spirit, but the spirit doesn't interact. It's just kind of a statue, that type of thing. They have the abduction experience, but it's not quite the same as what people experience separate from that. So what does that mean? And I think, if I'm remembering this right, and I hope that I am, that he has even changed his thoughts on exactly what people are perceiving, because perception is the unknown thing here. What constitutes consciousness and perception? Those are the big questions. So I don't think there's ever going to be a time where somebody can concretely say, this is the experience, and here's the part of the brain that does it. Well, okay, then why does that happen while I'm driving in a car? Why does that happen and my wife sees it with me? How does that happen? Why does that happen?
How did it happen the other night? Out by the fish pond.
Right, yeah, the fishes. Yeah. And here's a prime example of that. Jeremy was here from, God, it seemed like forever.
Thanks. Thursday to Tuesday.
Thursday to Tuesday.
It was forever.
And I think just about any time that Jeremy has come to stay with me, he's seen something or he's experienced something, whether it be at night or in the daytime. He saw the light on the ceiling, hear things scratching at the door, or at the closet rather, in his room, and he heard voices in his room. All that sort of thing. And this time, nothing. I mean, nothing. And he alluded a couple of times. He always makes the comment, tell the guy in the black sheet to come see me, blah, blah, blah. So the night that he leaves, I had to get up very early and take him down to the bus station, which is now probably about double the distance from my house that it used to be. So we got up really early, and then I worked all day, and then I came home, and I mean to tell you, Jeremy and I talked until 3 and 4 in the morning, or we're up playing Gears of War till 3 or 4 in the morning. And you do that for 4 or 5 days and then get up early and go to work, you're really exhausted.
And your cortisol imbalance is incredible.
I don't know. But I fell asleep on the couch, and Lisa left me alone there to sleep. And I woke up when she went to bed. She's like, "Are you coming up?" I said, "Yeah." And as I'm walking around the house and I go to the bathroom and I check my email and then I get a drink, I'm like, oh, I forgot to feed the fish. And for those of you who have ponds, you know that the koi fish don't eat in the wintertime. After 48 degrees, you stop feeding them. So he's got a limited number of days yet to put on a few more pounds for winter. And I thought, Christ, I forgot to feed the fish. And I look out the window and it's black outside. I mean, it's black. The solar lights that I have around the pond have exhausted their fuel for the night, and they've gone out. So I take my little solar flashlight and I go out with my bucket of food and I throw some in, and I'm shining the light on the water to see if he's coming up for it, and he does. And he's happily eating. And I mean, I heard nothing. I felt nothing. It was fairly cloudy. I don't remember. See, the moon, when we had gone up to my spot up in the country to meet up with Brad and Lee, it was it was a really bright night. The moon was almost full. It must have been somewhat cloudy, but my neighbor has a floodlight that lights up the whole backyard. And I hear, "Are you okay?" And I look over, and it's just like, oh. Well, it looks as if this black figure is standing on the other side of the fence of my neighbor's, like in my neighbor's backyard. But the longer I look, he's actually on the fence. He's standing on top of a chain link fence. And I I said something about, how are you standing there like that? And he's like what? What do you, like completely unaware that he's balancing on a fence. And I said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, and I kind of looked down at the ground at that point.
Wait, you said you're fine, or he said I'm fine?
I said I'm fine.
Oh, okay.
And because he asked me, am I okay? I said, yeah. I said, I'm curious, though. And keep in mind, I haven't seen this for a while. I said, with everything the direction that we're going, that Jeremy and I are talking about, and this whole questionnaire thing and gathering stuff, and just I guess the collective push that you, the audience, and we as the host of this thing are going. I wanted to know what this thing thought of that, because it represents the phenomena to me. And his answer was, well, it's more important what you think about it, which told me absolutely nothing. And I kind of snickered, and I looked down at the ground again, and when I looked back up, it was gone. And as I said to Jeremy on the phone, it takes longer to explain that little interaction than it did for it to happen, on its own. I mean, it was seconds. It was seconds. I wasn't scared. It was a weird sight, but I'm not going to lie. It was a little startling at first, but I recognized what it was. And so I found it curious, both in the fact that it was the day that Jeremy had pulled out is when this shows up. And then it was kind of a twofold answer, which was to say, and I'll just throw this out there, and I don't want to get into a whole political discussion here, but I had become, and I guess I'm not a real political guy. I don't follow it. It's all just so much double talk to me. It's like, why can't you just say what you mean? That sort of thing. And so I get really fed up with it really quick. But this whole thing about Occupy Wall Street and all of the unrest there and in Boston and now all over the world, I suppose, really been weighing on me, because you realize, what is going on. And this is happening in our country, and look at this, and look at these police swinging these batons at people who didn't do anything, and tear gassing them or macing them rather, and they didn't do anything. And I'm like, this is happening in my country. This is happening here. And so that's
in your bedroom. You maced me for no reason.
Wasn't my fault.
Oh.
And that was really, like, watching the videos and reading about it and all of that, like, really got me upset about the current state of all this stuff. And so that I thought maybe that's what was being asked about. But, it's kind of twofold. It's kind of based on it's more important how you feel about it. Am I more along the lines of, am I okay with what I remembered, which I mentioned on the live show, I'll mention it now here, that when I went on ATS on Saturday night to talk about Project Core, and of course they wanted to ask me a little about my own stuff. One of the things that Johnny Anonymous, our buddy over there, had asked me was, tell us about driving home from the beach and ending up in another state where you couldn't possibly have been, et cetera, et cetera. So I told that whole thing, and if anybody, goes back in our history and listens to that, you'll hear that I was in a car with this man that I picked up beside the road, and there were several little odd things about him, but when I dropped him off essentially at what he said was his house, which I didn't see a house, I just saw a lane and some woods, he said, "I'll see you again." And when I looked at him, it was not the same person who got in my car. It didn't look the same. There was an odd sheen to him. His eyes were very strange looking, although they weren't big and black or anything like that. Nothing so dramatic. It just was not the same person. And he said, "I'll see you again." And to which I became unbelievably terrified. I think I said something like, "Okay." And I took off. And then, the story, you can go back and listen to it. But I realized, and only because I think Johnny asked me, "Have you seen him again?" And it just like something literally snapped in my head. And I'm like, yeah, I have, because it's the guy in the black. That's him. I mean, I'm certain. I couldn't be more certain. That's him. And so is that what he was asking? Am I okay about? Is that what that was? Are you okay? Do you see the continuity here? You're seeing the black being represented in a way that disturbs you, and now this, is that disturbing to you? I mean, it's like that kind of thing. I'm almost more inclined to think it's that rather than, the Wall Street thing. I mean, I have no real good answers. Like I said, this is not. This doesn't give me any answers. It just is. I guess continuing a thread that this particular person, let's say, has been around me before, and now I'm starting to connect the dots in that subset of my stuff, if that makes any sense. And that's disturbing in a way to me, knowing that what I thought was a new direction or a new way of perceiving this stuff is actually tied to all the old fearful things. And that, I guess, in some way, makes it more fearful now. But not in a way that I can't handle it. So I guess I'm getting better about the fear-based stuff. It just has taken me a long time to reach that. But yeah, so that's it. It wasn't any grandiose experience. It was just that, and there it is. And no real answers either. Just a very, very odd sight. And me thinking, wow, he's grown since the last time I saw him. And he was tall then. But no, he was standing on the fence. And not wavering, by the way, not balancing or anything like that, like bone still. And standing on the fence. With his arms crossed, no doubt. So figure that out. And I garnered from the reaction that he really didn't know where he was standing. So that's curious, I think. And you had said on the live show, something about symbolism. How about on the fence? Am I on the fence about something? Symbolic meanings and stuff like that. Like looking past that. Maybe, somebody on the fence.
Yeah, but the fact that he didn't know where he was.
Yeah.
I think that fits in
if you can believe it.
Well, I think that fits in nicely with the woman who sort of fades into the background. I mean, it's as if, he's a projection, or we're a projection, or
it's
something.
An overlay, yeah. An overlay.
Physics don't seem to apply.
Yeah. But if you're going to talk about symbology, what's more symbolic than standing on a fence? Are you on the fence about something? Are they on the fence about me, or am I on the fence about them, or am I on the fence about this whole thing? And I don't think I am. But I feel kind of, I guess if I'm on the fence about anything, I'm on the fence about how much fear that this can evoke when I realize the connectivity to other events in my life. I guess that's the best way to put it. And it did. I mean, it made me kind of stutter. If you go back and listen to that ATS show, I kind of went, because I was remembering, like, right then it was coming to me like, holy shit, are you kidding me? I mean, it was a real slap in the forehead. I was like, holy Christ, are you serious? That was that guy. That's it. That's the eyes. That's the doll, infantile eyes. That's it. I'm not going to say, because it would be untrue to say that they look exactly alike in bone structure, I guess, or facial composition, but the mannerism and the way that it speaks. You just know that's it. That's him. But the bone structure is not the same. But then again, if it can change the way it looks, then it doesn't have to be exact. It's it was the smile, the eyes, the tone, the reassurance of I'll see you again. Which got me to thinking about the connection of age. I mean, it was like when we had Susan Kornacki on the show. And, at a certain age, her experience with it changed. And she, too, saw these black cloaked this kind of manifestation of what it is, which blew me away that somebody else was seeing this kind of, I don't know, something that doesn't even feel like a UFO thing at all, but feels more like a ghost thing or a dead person than anything alien. It's just such a complete departure. It's like a 180 from the kind of, facade that it used to present to this. So it got me to thinking, like, is there an age where this changes for people? And so there would be a great question for somebody that would want to come on as an experiencer and talk about what they've seen. Like, at certain ages, did this change for you? I don't know. It is curious that, around that 40-something is where I've heard now 3 or 4 people say, yeah, it radically changed at that age. What does that mean? I mean, what is that doing? Is it like you have to mature into this in some way? Like you have to take so much of it before it actually starts to show you a truer sense of what it is? And if it even is a truer sense of what it is, I don't know. And then you would ask me, if I hadn't freaked out at a certain point, where would I be with it? And I do ask myself that. And I like to think that I would, I don't know, like Whitley talks about, going up into a room and one dropping through the ceiling and like meditating with him every night. Like, is that where I would be? I don't know. I mean, sounds nice, but I don't know what it is. So I have no way of knowing where I would be with it. So, it's still nothing but questions. So that's pretty much it for me.
This has been the Jeff Ritzmann Hour.
Yeah.
On Paratopia.
Is it over already? Wow.
Not yet. Yeah, I wish I had some experiences to report, but gosh golly gee darn, I got nothing.
You're dry, huh?
I'll try. Try it out.
Well, I guess we should say on the program, and not so much the live show, because not everybody listens to the live show, but we did go up to one of my spots up in the sticks and met up with our listener Brad, our buddy Brad, and our co-host Lee Townsend from the live show, and hung out and talked. And wow, I mean, Brad has seen some really heavy duty stuff up in that area, which is I was grateful to hear about when he called into the live show. But that confirms to me that whole area is interesting.
Well, he from where his house sits, he looks down into the general vicinity of where you had a lot of your experiences.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things is that there are a lot of high power, high voltage,
high tension wires. Yeah,
we talked about that. As what's the link there? And he had seen a globe of light or two above these high tension wires at some point. And we talked about maybe they cause some sort of hallucinations or put you in another frame of mind or something. Except that they're not up near his house, and so he's looking down, however many miles away that actually is. So clearly it's not affecting him. So there must be some other connection. And of course, I think anyone familiar with UFO literature in this regard has probably heard, well, they're using these things as fuel or something. But
right.
I mean, this is no different to me than ghosts draining batteries, right? So, I mean, does alien technology use the same power drain system that ghosts do? So I don't know what's going on there, but there does seem to be a correlation, right, between these two. We just don't know what it is.
Well, I mean, I think you made a pretty good statement. Like, you said something to the effect of, well, what if that's how they get high?
Well, yeah.
Like, what if they're drawn to that like moths to a flame? Or what if whatever this phenomena is can manifest within a certain field that then renders them visible? Or perception, our perception is then able to visualize it, or maybe the electricity that's coming off of some of these, high tension wires or voltage regulators on these big, these big power stations and whatnot. And let's not forget the nuclear power stations. Nuclear power stations.
Come on, Jack Bauer, say it.
There's very interesting fields produced around those as well, and there's a lot of sightings around those type of installations. And
So basically, if we do shrooms to see them, they use electromagnetic anomalies or something along those lines to see us.
Maybe. I mean, who knows? And who knows how long they can make that effect last? I mean, I look at it this way. If I had made the statement one time that what if the beings that everyone sees and equates to what they call the Greys, I'd squeezed one of their heads one time and it fell apart like so many, thicknesses of baklava, right?
Delicious.
Yeah. No nuts, though, and certainly no honey.
Well, there's probably nuts.
Right. So I had said something to the effect of, it was almost like it was made out of air. Like, what if it is taking the pollutants of the air or moisture in the air and then kind of using that as a puppet of sorts? Because there was certainly nothing left of it in the morning. I'll put it to you that way. There wasn't a pile of broken alien on the floor in the morning. What if it's gathering the excess bleed off energy that comes off of a high tension wire, like the stuff that is predominantly harmful to us to be around? What if it is gathering those particles together in such a way as it manifests some sort of perhaps solid object that then would garner radar readings and visuals and all of that? What if that's what this does, is that it manifests itself out of what's already here? It doesn't bring something with it. There's nothing to bring. It's using what's here. I don't know. I mean, I think that was it was a good observation to your part to say, what if that's how they get off? What if that's how they raise their vibratory levels, if we want to go in that
that's how they come to the third density, gentlemen.
Right. Yeah.
The fifth density reptilians.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, that's looking past, the notion that they're just there sucking power off of our as if they would even use the same stuff. And water. I mean, water is another big one that, Loch Raven Reservoir we've talked about on the show before. And when you go back in the literature and you look at percentages, I remember reading one time that it was 75% of all sightings happen around high tension wires or water. And so there's definitely something going on there. I mean, in both places, there's energy, basically. There is measurable energy that's in those places, more predominantly than most places, I think, on the planet. And so look at that. And now let's talk Ted Rose spot out there in the Southwest. What is it about that spot? I mean, that's the geological survey of that area. Do you remember what he said about that? I mean, was there something particularly interesting about that or not?
Place is made of licorice.
Oh, Jesus.
No, I don't remember.
But, I mean, all of these hot spots, I mean, there's certainly, we can look at Pine Bush in the Hudson Valley and say there's certainly something interesting there geologically. Gulf Breeze. I mean, at least in my opinion, now having felt an earthquake, you had asked me about the pinpoint earthquakes that I've talked about on the show that were there, that maybe, you're standing in a crowd and two people feel it and the rest of the crowd doesn't feel anything. Very specific. No, it felt nothing like an earthquake. It felt literally like you were in an elevator that got dropped 6 inches into the ground and then pulled back up immediately. That's what it felt like. So clearly there's something geologically going on there.
Right? Perceptually?
Perceptually, that's what it felt like.
See, I feel like that at least once a day.
Really?
I mean, when you were talking about that I think I'd said it reminds me of that thing that started. I remember the day it started when I was working at Broadway Video for a VH1 show called True Spin, and I was taking a leak in a bathroom stall, and I felt an internal displacement. It felt like I rose a few inches and then came back down. And I've been feeling it ever since. So,
wow.
I mean, that to me sounds a lot like what you're talking about. It's just kind of go, whoop, whoop.
That's exactly, and it's just that quick, except I went down. It felt to me like I dropped into, like the ground went up from underneath of me. Mm-hmm. And I actually visually became disoriented. I mean, I actually had the visual of whoop, whoop.
Yeah.
And, I was just like, the person next to me, I said, what was that? And she said, that's what everybody's been talking about. That's the earthquakes. That's what, and then we started asking people around, did you feel that? No. What are you talking about? Well, we just felt it. We were the last ones in the group. Everyone else had already had it.
This past year, I've been feeling it, not just up, but horizontally. I've been feeling it like I'm coming out my face. Whoop,
wow.
Whoop. Yeah, okay. And that's visually disorienting.
I mean, frankly, it scared me because I thought I was passing out. I thought it was like I locked my knees or something, but it didn't. Even though it didn't have any resemblance to that kind of sensation, it was really disorienting for that split second. You're like, my God, what was that? And you're looking at the ground, thinking, am I standing on a manhole cover or something? I mean, that's what it felt like. And when I went out to the road shot, and I stood on the spot where that photograph was taken, I told you before, it felt like the top of my head was stretching. When Lee went there, that's what he felt. I mean, it's a very bizarre place, and I'd be willing to bet that there's some kind of interesting geological factor to that area that may have contributed to the manifestations that people saw there. Notwithstanding Ed Walters and all of that, but there was plenty more before and after him. So, geology's got to play some part in this in some way. I mean, certainly Brad talking about seeing high tension wires that are way far away and still seeing something around them. I mean, that doesn't have a bearing on his own perception of it. He's not near the high tension wires.
But I feel like we're making a mistake if we say that that there's an answer there, because to me it's the same as shrooms. You're in.
No, it's not an answer.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is it's all of this stuff that you can find externally in shrooms or in a high strangeness area, high tension wires, whatever, UFOs flying overhead where you go whoop whoop. I mean, that's all stuff that you can experience without those things, without those areas, without those substances, if you just know how to do it.
I guess. I mean,
and I think that's the thing that I find fascinating, is that there are these things that we attribute to outside sources that, maybe enhancements or quick workarounds toward things that can occur naturally within us without them.
Well, they can, but my question would be, why did they, or why do they in those specific spots? See, because that then points to that there's something to the spot that you're in. I certainly didn't have it on the bus on the way down. I didn't have it when I got home. I had it there. That's what I'm getting at, is like, I'm sure there's other ways to experience all sorts of things like this that are internal that you could probably do on your own. I don't know, because I've not had that. But in these strange spots, you get these odd experiences for, whatever it might be, if it's a UFO sighting down to a pinpoint earthquake type thing. What is that? I mean, what is so specialized about that area that you have it there? I don't know. Maybe it's less to do with the area, more to do with the conversation or the reason that you're there. I don't know.
Well, but all of those things something is affecting something in you.
Possibly, yes.
And so can you affect something in you without those things? And wouldn't that be fascinating?
Yeah.
And the answer to me is yeah.
Yeah.
So why aren't we? To me that's a more fascinating question than, why are these geological areas?
Well, my thing,
because it just means because when you ask why these geological areas, I don't know, they're just, and I don't mean you personally, I mean in general, it sounds like we're trying to get at maybe there are these gateways, but it's no. Maybe it's no more or less so than shrooms are gateways, but it's that would be but shrooms grow in shit, so it doesn't. There is no place where shrooms are magically growing because that place is a portal. It's just that they grow in shit, and if you take them, you have this.
Right.
If you walk through high tension wires, you have this. If you walk in, whatever, a place that is by the water with a bunch of quartz.
Right.
It's the same, it's the same effect. So it's just random. I'm saying this, maybe the spots are random and they're not gateways. They're not portals that open up for a limited time or something. They're just random spots of something that affects you that you can affect yourself and not even have to worry about the spots or the shrooms.
And so does that correlate to UFOs show up in certain spots because people come to see them? Yes?
I don't know. I haven't thought that through.
I mean, it stands to reason if it's something within an individual, if an individual has that random part and that's the hook, and then that person tells another one and another one and another one, and pretty soon it grows into a phenomena or a flap in a certain area, then did the genesis of that start with one particular event whereby this thing was shown to one person, and then the more people that show up, the more conversation they have about it, the more it opens that up within themselves to be able to either A, allow the manifestation to happen, or B, the anti-structural thing comes into play where people are so out of their element and so out of routine now because they want to experience this that they become anti-structural, and that makes the paranormal happen.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is all a larger version of stand here where I'm standing and look, and you'll see it. If you stand to the left or the right of me, you're not going to see it.
Right.
You know, maybe there are these certain areas of that have their own geological or energetic makeup that are just like that.
Yeah.
Stand to the left or right of Gulf Breeze, you're not going to see it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I guess I should mention that when you were down for your visit, that I took you to where I grew up. And so Jeremy got to see, at least the window where the two windows where my two rooms were, and the park where we had the sighting of the. Well, I showed him where my first sighting was, which was in the front lawn, but also the park where Lisa and I saw the chrome sphere UFO that was only visible from that real specific vantage point of my position. So, and. A completely, Jeremy, back me up here, am I right? Completely typical suburbia. I mean, not a exceedingly countrified area. It's just, it's typical suburbia, and nothing particularly special about it geologically, as far as I know. I mean, it's just, that's where a lot of stuff happened to me. So I don't know. I mean, if it's the area, it's the area. I mean, certain places have had enduring sightings. Like Pine Bush is always going to have probably something going on there in the way of light phenomena, or people perceive ships there. But I mean,
it seems like now that you're saying that, a little light bulb is going off in my head, which is that what do Pine Bush and your hometown have in common?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. What?
What do they have in common?
What do they have in common, Jeff?
I've been to both places.
Indeed. Well, no, but what do they have in common besides that? What they have in common is a local residents who don't want to talk about what's going on.
Oh yeah.
And so the answer to the question of, gee, why Jeff Ritzman and not so-and-so, the neighbor, is that Jeff is willing to engage it and talk about it.
Right.
So the town is manifesting this or inhabited by this or, immersed in it somehow.
Right.
But there are few and far between people who are going to open their shades to it.
Yeah.
Brad on top of his hill, looking down every night. I mean, he talks about going outdoors. I mean, the way he talks about it is the same sort of quality of looking for this that we've talked about on the show that is necessary to find it.
Oh, yeah.
And of course you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, maybe that's just it. Maybe it's... and isn't it interesting? I mean, I wonder if that's almost not by design, but by the nature of living in, let's call it a haunted area. I don't know what to call it. An area of high strangeness.
Yeah.
Is that the unconscious reaction is to block it out, is to be real conservative about it and not open your mouth and laugh at it and all that, more so than other places where people would feel somewhat comfortable talking about it, I think. Maybe.
You mean like someplace like Sedona, Arizona?
Yeah.
Where it's widely talked about, discussed, and open. I mean, and I said that to Brad. I said, the most frustrating thing about seeing so many things up here in this area is that this is not the kind of thing that you can discuss with people who live here. You're talking about farmers and people who've lived up there their entire lives, it's really no nonsense people who would just scoff at such stuff.
Can you talk about it in Gulf Breeze? I mean, people were on TV. They had like the whole town on TV. So
sure,
what might be interesting is to correlate places that have persistent high strangeness, like your place, Pine Bush, wherever, against places that have, spurts in time where it happens and then seems to leave.
Right.
Is there a difference? I mean, do the people who live there not talk about it versus the people who just have it happen to them where it's something new and they're like, oh my gosh, what is this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Pine Bush certainly, became, and I had, I didn't particularly witness this myself, but I had a lot of people that I spoke to because I was really into going to Gulf Breeze and studying the sightings there and the videotapes. And my God, I had tons of them at one point, but, it became it became a Peyton place, for lack of a better way to put it. And I think, if I had to make a guess, and this is only a guess, I would say I bet a lot of people don't talk about it anymore because it probably brings up bad memories for that kind of kind of overtone that went along with it. I'd be willing to hedge a bet on that. Whereas Pine Bush seems a completely different thing. I mean, there's only a couple of researchers that I knew of at the time that Lee and I went up there that I could say were really hardcore pursuing this. And the people in the area, we met 2 chicks at McDonald's that would talk to us about it, but that was it.
Well, you'd said it felt as though people were going to bed unnaturally early.
Well, it was like Black Bart was coming to town. It wasn't that they went to bed unnaturally early. It was that the doors got locked, the shades got pulled down. It was like a ghost town. So as soon as the sun dropped, it was really strange.
Let's think about this here. We might be on the verge of a little insight. You've got Exeter. Now they're doing a festival.
Okay.
They had one incident, or 2 if you, Betty Hill and incident in Exeter.
Uh-huh.
Then you've got New Mexico, of course, Roswell.
Yeah.
They have one incident, and, they want to practically be a national holiday if they could.
Right.
Then you've got Gulf Breeze. The entire town's on TV talking about it. And you've got Stevensville, where, everybody's in the town is on TV talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
These are all one-off incidents. And then you go to, cut to wherever Ted Phillips is, Marley Woods. We don't know because the town doesn't want anyone to know.
Right.
You go to the Skinwalker Ranch. Where's that? Well, we don't know because they don't really want you to know.
Right.
We go to your town. Nobody talks about it. We go to Pine Bush. Black Bart's coming to town. You know? Is there a pattern there, or am I just pulling that out of my ass? No,
it probably is some pattern. How much it figures in, I don't know. But, yeah, there's a definite pattern to that. Towns that embrace it or populaces that embrace it, I think, I would say I don't know. It's unfair for me to say, like back in the time where Hynek wrote the Hudson Valley UFO sightings, was the town talking about it? I'm sure they were. I just know my experience when I went there was that it was odd. Because we rode up and down Searsville Road all day long. Saw people out and about. There was vacationers. There was rock climbers and hikers and, kayaking and all of that. What do they call it? Hang gliding. All of that kind of stuff going on. And then as soon as the sun fell, voof. Nothing.
But you even see that in any horror or sci-fi movie about a paranormal town. Nobody wants to talk about it. Everyone draws their shades. The wolves are coming out at night, so everybody get inside. Don't talk about it. Don't tell the new people who come to town.
Right.
So this even plays out in our own movies, that this is how we perceive this if we live in a place like this.
Yeah.
So maybe that's actually based on reality.
It might be.
Wouldn't that be fascinating? And so is that the phenomena doing that? Or is it what is that? Is that us doing? Is that some... I guess you can't ask why, but let's just note it for now,
Yeah, note it. It's, it's a curious thing. And I would say a very decided difference from just those 2, Gulf Breeze to Pine Bush. there's to me, at least, in my experience, it was a complete 180. Whereas when you go to Gulf Breeze, you get people who will... I got lost. I got lost on the way going to the road shot because I really wanted to see that. And I got lost. And I passed somebody in the road. I waved my hand out, and they stopped, got in a pickup truck. I said, I know this is going to sound dumb. He goes, where's the road shot? I mean, like, I was like, yeah, down here about 200 yards. Oh, okay, great. I mean, or wherever he told me to go. But they know.
What is the TV show with Josh Gates?
Destination Truth.
Destination Truth. They went to, was it Czechoslovakia or something? They remember that the guy got thrown from his chair.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that little sort of patch of woods, nobody wanted to talk about. Nobody wanted to bring them there.
Right.
So it's not even just in America you're seeing this.
Oh, no. No, it's across the board, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, nobody wanted to go there. I mean, that to me was one of the more amazing episodes of that show when they went to that place, because that reminded me a lot of the M Triangle, which was, I guess, popular back in the 80s when it was on Sightings. That was a spot over in Russia where there'd been a lot of very weird stuff, which they said, could it be geological activity? People see UFOs. People are chased by globules of light into the woods and they're burned. I mean, one man, I think there was two men who were chased in the woods by a glob of light and they were burned. One of them went crazy. The other one killed himself. I mean, it's a very strange area. And they even said it's a possibility it's, a psychotronic weapons testing place that's being tested on the public. Or the small, I would say, little culture that built up around that area. But that man, you saw him sitting in that chair in that green, eerie, night vision camera. And the next thing you see is a streak that is flying up and out of frame. I mean, and I got news for you. That doesn't happen unless they went out of frame, in which case you're talking about several feet in the air from a standing still position. And he ended up, I think they said 25 feet away on his back, completely knocked the wind out of him. Very strange. I mean, exceedingly strange. And that place, those people would only go so far, and that was it. And that's a lot of their episodes. In fact, when they go to really remote locations, there's you get some people that I think there was one that was a Mayan ruin that they went to where the townspeople said, we're not going up there. Even their horses started to freak out at a certain altitude. They said, that's it. We're on foot from here.
Is this show still on, by the way?
I believe it is.
Oh,
and good. Josh, if you're listening,
we'd love to have you on. I mean, that's like the only show that I actually trusted what I was seeing for some reason. I don't know why, but for some reason.
I think they're pretty honest about what they see and what they don't see, and they don't make any bones about that. I think the only thing that they've really touted is that they did get a Yeti print or a Bigfoot print that was pretty astounding. That I think is one of their biggest finds on that program. But most of the time they go, nope, we didn't find what we were looking for. Experienced some little weird things, but they've captured some pretty decent evidence on that show. But
now I'd like to know, when we look back at Gothic horror and things like this, where to talk about it is to bring it into existence. We don't want to talk about it because it might hear us. you know. Well, I mean, if that's true, which came first? Did Dracula come out of don't let him in?
Right.
If he comes to the door, don't let him in. They have to be invited in. I mean, sounds very similar to the stuff we talk about.
Sure. Well, it's also common for like people who talk about demons and that sort of thing. That's that's the same sort of thing.
So where does that come from? I mean, does that come from experience, or does that come from the imagination first?
I mean, if you ask my opinion, I think it's something that we know. I think it's something that maybe just through general conditioning, I think that we know that you can incite paranormal events. You can do that. I would say likely that it's perhaps that somewhere along the line somebody you started getting really good horror stories back in the spiritualist movement, and did somebody stumble upon that kind of thing and write it into a story, and then that became like the lure of the vampires. You have to let them in, because when you really look at the genesis of that story, I mean, what does that mean? You invite them in, so you invite them in to bite you and turn you into one of them. That's not what you want. So maybe I don't know, maybe that was just invented to make them deceitful. or seem deceptive, and that's probably more the genesis of it than anything, intrinsically that we know or that we suspect about real paranormal events. But I mean, there's art imitates life, vice versa. So I don't know. I mean, that's certainly possible. I mean, this other show that was on this weekend was the Paranormal Witness, which is a relatively new one that's been on, I think, Sci-Fi. And I really like that show because there you get to hear it right from the person's mouth who experienced it. And they do these little reenactment things, in which I might say that many times the casting director is extraordinarily gracious. But they usually are in those reenactments. But, I mean, things like the one that we watched, which was a man and woman who became obsessed with the Ouija board. And then all of a sudden had, like a year later, had some kind of malevolent spirit terrorizing the house and pulling all sorts of nonsense. I mean, they invited it in based on that Ouija board thing and becoming obsessed with that because that's where it first ID'd itself and said, I'll never leave here. I'll never leave you. It took a year, but there it was. And there were little pepperings of weirdness in between that year, but that year was when it really blew up in them. I mean, if you ask me, I say it's something that we probably know about the weird. We probably realize somehow along the line that, you bring up things that we've forgotten, that sort of thing. I think that's something that you just suspect that you can invite this on yourself. I mean, you see it across the board. When you look at especially experiencer support groups, I mean, they're valuable in that they let people talk about it. But I've talked before about, what happens after the experiencer support group, which is more experiences. The minute people would drop away from it and involve themselves in something else, that's when they really became free of it, which...
Well, that gets into, are they making stuff up to have something to talk about? Or...
Well, I mean, that's certainly how it marginalizes out, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, there's your escape hatch.
Well, it's also probably true.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. I mean...
probably depends on the person.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly. I'm sure every support group has a faker in there or a wannabe. But, by and large, a lot of the people that were...
Well, just even talking about the TV special, The Aliens Have Landed, where they actually did their own hypnosis session that proved out exactly what we're saying about hypnosis. Mm-hmm. But then they talked about these support groups and saying that, the pressure of a support group in general is to come up with more stuff. And there's this peer pressure to have it conform and to interpret it in the same way that the group wants you to interpret it.
Uh-huh.
I
did not encounter that in the group that I was a part of. No. In fact, I would say it was almost the opposite. Some people, would say, just say somebody would come off with something that was completely off the wall and, silly. Let's just put it that way.
Well, what would be an example of that? I mean, this is a support group meeting where somebody thought that they went shoe shopping at the mall inside of a UFO, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Would that be silly?
With their daughter, yeah. I mean, that was considered a little bit like you would kind of do the dog cock your head and look at them and go, really? Because that's not been my experience. And I don't think it was the experience of most of the people in the group, but we listened. I mean, we certainly didn't say, oh, that's bullshit.
But would that be an example, or are you talking about something else?
No, that would be a decent example, I guess. I mean, I remember certain people in the group felt that the experience itself was horrifying and evil, and they wanted to escape it. I think that was by and large, for some people, that was their sentiment. How do I stop this? I feel powerless to stop it. I think it's really strange that as time has gone on, that most of the people that I meet now are like, well, I don't even think about that part of it. Like, I'm not brutalized by it in such a way. It's just very strange and it's scary, but it is what it is. You hear that more now than I want it to stop, and I don't know how to get out of this. Back then, that was the opinion. And for some people, I remember asking one older guy that was there, and he'd had some very odd experiences that sounded kind of a lot like my stuff, which was, I mean, not by any means was it exact, but certain symbology was there. Visual perceptions, certain things were kind of similar. And I said to him, I said, you think this is evil? Do you think this is bad? And he's like, well, I look at it this way, if it is, I don't know what it wants with me. And is it scary? Yeah. I don't necessarily think of it in terms of bad and good. It just is. And so if there's something to learn from it in the end, then I'll take my lumps. Which I thought that was an incredibly benign way to look at it. And I wasn't sure if I agreed with him or not. But some people there were the exact opposite, was how do I get this to stop? Nobody ever really had an answer for that at the time. But I don't think anybody ever felt like they had to make something up like a competition type thing. I can think of a couple meetings where we went in the door and everybody's like, anything happen? Nope. We all just sat around and talked about family and work.
Well, what's interesting about that to me is we were talking on the last live show about it in terms of a hero's journey, that it's got to be a solo thing that you see your way through, that there can be no real therapy for. And so if you go through the hero's journey, you fight the demons of your own expectations, which is your fear, and you come out the other side hopefully having learned something. That's if you go through it. Now, if you don't go through it, if you just go, this is horrifying, I don't know what this is, I don't want this in my life, how do I get rid of it? Mm-hmm. Well, the answer to that is also leave the support group. Stop thinking about it, leave it behind, and just ignore it, and hopefully it will actually go away. Deny it and it'll go away. So in both instances, the thing to do is be alone with it. One is be alone with it in denial, the other is be alone with it and embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. And then you get, if you think about it that way, then it's like, well, what sort of mass disclosure can there be? What sort of societal, reaching out to this can there be? Can there even be one? I mean, personal journey means personal journey.
Yeah, it's kind of I think what Lee and I talked about years ago was that it becomes, is it isolatory? Is that the word? That it
Let's make it a word.
Yeah, sure, I'll invent that. It kind of, and I guess this kind of tends to go with George's thing of anti-structure or marginality, that it does tend to isolate you from people. You have phenomena that happens in the house that other people see, your friends see, and then they don't want to come around because it freaks them out. And then, you go to a support group and you make new acquaintances that are having something similar happen in their lives, and you discuss that amongst yourselves, and you try and reach some kind of it almost kind of guides you into knowing a certain subset of people. And the old people, the old friends that you had, if they're any kind of friend at all, they'll hang around. They'll go through it with you. They'll stay there. But acquaintances and I don't know, certain people will fall by the wayside. And I've talked to you about this before, where I don't think that you and I meeting was an accident. I don't think that was...
it was written in the stars.
Well, I think you are led to certain people. It's interesting how it becomes such an important thing to you to discuss with other people, and you feel good for sharing with other people about this stuff. So if you're led to certain people, it kind of becomes, you become isolated into that subset of friends that are into this like you are into this. And, I'll be the first one to say that I've made more long-term friendships from this than I've made from art or school or anything like that. I find that part of it, that it isolates, very interesting. So it almost makes you or forces you to be alone with it. It forces you out of your comfort zone of your usual group of friends. Never mind the friends that will say, Jeff, I really think you need to go talk to someone. Never mind that subset of friends that will either hang with you or will depart. Most will depart after they see it for themselves, as Lisa and I can attest to. But So in that way, it does isolate you, and that almost makes me think that it's a. This goes to what Lee says. It's very personal, and so can anyone help? Can anyone make you realize that you can stop it? I don't know, or that you can walk away from it. You can deny it, but that's not easy to do after you've seen it. It's probably like crack. Or heroin, a heroin addict, it takes that first shot. It's like, oh man, this is so good. I can't walk away from this. In many ways, it is addictive. It is obsessive. That's its nature to me. And it's not only just, I used to think it was just, well, all human beings like a mystery. They want to solve the mystery. They want to get the brass ring. There isn't one for this, but yet it keeps tempting you with more. So it's seductive in that way. I mean, all of those things tend to be like a whirlpool that drags you in and isolates you from everyone else so that you must handle this and decide for yourself where it fits into your life. And that's how I look at it.
If what you think is more important than what it actually is, as this guy on the fence tells you, then you're right. There can be no brass ring. There can only be more and more stuff to think about.
Right, exactly.
And to what end?
Indeed.
We can only hope it's some sort of evolutionary thing.
Well, that may be already going on. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, where you're at already. I mean, where the world is at already, or at least the people who have these experiences, the different ways in which they perceive the world. Because that's the thing. When I used to talk, like, you do a lecture somewhere to a MUFON group or something like that, and you talk about this stuff, I think the first question that came out of like 5 or 6 of those discussions or lectures in a row that I did way back in the mid-90s, I guess, the first thing that would come out of people's mouths would be, how do you live daily life knowing what you know and seeing what you've seen? And the easy answer is that, well, what else are you supposed to do? You don't have any choice about it. You have to. But you will never look at the world exactly the same way as you did before. It is that impactful that you just simply won't look at things in exactly the same way as you did before. You see things deeper. You become a little bit more, I would hope that, for some people, I think some people become more critical of what they perceive in daily life as, what am I doing here? You begin to question things a lot more, which I guess, when you tend to question things a lot more, that includes religion and all of these things that a lot of people hold dear. And that's where, it kind of falls for some people that this is demonic because it's leading you away from the church or the synagogue or whatever. But it makes you question everything. And I think that's part of an evolutionary process, that we're supposed to question everything, to become more curious, to, try to look at peak human experience as just what it is. This is peak human experience. Whether or not it has any basis in physical reality is irrelevant. It's peak human experience, and what you perceive and how you perceive it and all of that. That's all part of being some kind of evolutionary process. So regardless of whether anyone says it's leading us anywhere, it may or may not be. It may just be the natural progression of the way we're supposed to go. When you look at the core data, when that's done, maybe we'll find something there that says it seems to be pushing in a certain direction, and this is the way it's pushing for this subset of the population, which I find interesting. I haven't checked the ticker tape lately, but you and I know there was already a couple of consistencies that were coming up within the study that are kind of interesting. Not totally unexpected, but interesting. So who knows where that kind of thing is going to lead, and how certain experiences will differ based upon one very important, like it hinges on one question. What do all the other ones mean at that point? So I tend to think, when I think about it's more important how you feel about it, I almost take that a little bit more on an uneasy note to say, should I know? Like, should I know? Should I be recognizing something here that I'm not? And that's what it means?
Well, you'll find out when you get whipped for mentioning it today.
Well, that's true. I hope not. But as I said before you asked me, before we started the show, if I can't mention that, then, anything that I would say about it is up for grabs. And so I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. But I feel all right with that.
Very good. Well, maybe there's where we should leave it for now.
Okay.
And say our goodbyes. Don't forget to catch us, of course, on Sunday, 10 p.m. Eastern on Paratopia Live. Next week we will have, for the very first time on this show, one Anne Strieber.
Oh, excellent.
So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Until then, I'm going to say sweet dreams.
And until then, I'm going to say, in the thread on our message board regarding this show, tell us what you think about, having the whole experiencer thing on. I mean, I'd like some feedback on that to see what people think about kind of leaning more that direction, still having the other stuff, but adding that in on a more frequent basis. I'm curious what people think about that. And if you'd like, call in on Sunday. We'll yell the number out when we get started and call in and tell us what you think of that whole premise. And we'll take it from there.
I'm sticking with sweet dreams.
Sweet dreams, everybody.
Paratopia.